Today we're going to make one of my absolute favorite things, Madeiran Bolo de Caco. This traditional bread can be eaten all year round, but it's especially traditional at Christmas time where we eat it with
the pork and garlic. This is actually we make at Christmas time. Is this what you make at Christmas? Yes. So can you pronounce it the way you're supposed to pronounce it for me, Claudio?
I finally perfected this recipe just in time for Christmas, and now I hope that everyone can enjoy it with this gluten-free and vegan version. Welcome to my channel, everyone, and if you're new here, welcome. My name's Trish, and I hope to earn your subscription today. My father is from Madeira, Portugal, which is a gorgeous island just off the coast of Morocco. And ever since I visited Madeira for the very first time with my grandmother and parents, I fell in love with the local bread called Bolo de Caco, which is a round, poofier flatbread that's traditionally made on a hot stone. My family and I were able to visit Madeira again this past summer, where we were blessed to find the Casa do Bolo de Caco. This incredible treasure is in Funchal, Madeira, where we got to meet Claudio.
Let's meet Claudio. This is Claudio.
Hello. And he took us through exactly how they make this traditional Bolo de Caco. So let's learn how he does it. The dough consists of flour, water, sweet potato, salt, and yeast. The full recipe for the gluten-free and wheat-containing Bolo de Caco are on my website, tomarecmecrazy.com. The sweet potatoes used in Bolo de Caco provide the sugar. This variety of sweet potato is also known as Japanese sweet potato. They have a reddish-purple skin and a creamy-colored flesh. Claudio made sure to emphasize to me that you must use fresh yeast to make Madeiran Bolo de Caco. Commercial dried yeast will not work. The first thing we need to do is to bake a sweet potato in the oven. After giving it a quick wash and dry, I poke a few holes in and I bake it in the oven on a baking tray for about half an hour at 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius. Then we'll remove the sweet potato skin and just begin mashing our sweet potato. You don't want to have any lumps of sweet potato in your bread. Now I'm going to activate my yeast. So I've already pre-measured and heated by water. Now it's warm enough that I can touch it with my finger without feeling like it's burning, but it feels fairly hot. That usually means it's safe for our yeast. And we're going to use fresh yeast. Fresh yeast usually comes like this in a nice block. And what I do is I place it into a container like this one, an airtight container, and I keep it in the freezer. And then when I'm ready to use it, I just cut up and crumple the pieces like this. I'm going to tear my scale and then add in my 100 grams of sweet potato. And then we add our crumbled yeast. And then what I like to do is just squeeze it with my fingers. This is what my grandmother used to do. And just to break down the little bits of sweet potato and yeast and just make sure there's no chunks in there. If you're not comfortable with that, you can always just use a whisk. For the traditional Bolo de Caco with wheat, this is all the sugar that you need. But I find I like to add just a little bit of maple syrup just to give my yeast that little bit of boost it needs. Gluten-free flours have a really hard time rising. So we need to give it every bit of boost that we can, and maple syrup and yeast love one another. And then I'll cover it up and set it aside for about 15 minutes. Next, we're going to mix up our gluten-free flour mix. If you don't know how to make homemade flours yourself and you want to save a little bit of money going gluten-free, check out my video here. And what I would do for this recipe is throw in the millet, the sorghum, and the brown rice all together, blend them up, and throw them in. But if you'd like to add your flours individually, just add in millet flour, sorghum flour, tapioca or potato starch, and whole psyllium husk as your binder. Then I'm adding baking powder. Now this is definitely breaking the tradition. However, Bolo de Caco is supposed to puff up and really rise while it's baking. And with gluten-free flours, it just doesn't have that opportunity. So we need to give it as much of a bit of a kick as we can. So lastly, we're going to add in our salt, whisk these up. And once you find that they're nice and incorporated, by the time you would have made your homemade flour, your yeast will be ready to go. Once your yeast mixture is activated, you'll see it has risen. There'll be lots of bubbles on top and it's ready to just pour it on in. And I like to use a dough hook to give this a mix, but you can use your hands or a spoon or whatever you like. But if you don't have a dough hook and you'd like to get one, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find one. And we didn't add quite all of our flours yet, so you're going to see that it's going to look like you have way too much liquid. We didn't allow the psyllium husk to absorb any water yet. this will begin to work really quickly, and it kind of allows the psyllium husk to absorb a little bit of the water before we add in the last bit of flour. I let this sit for about 5 minutes, and it's really quite thick already, you can see. So the psyllium husk has done its job. Now I'm going to start adding my brown rice flour, just a little at a time. So this is looking good now. It's starting to pull away from the sides, and it's still quite a wet dough. But as I'm mixing it, you can see it's starting to come up with my dough hook. So that's perfect. So I'm going to stop now. That's exactly how I want it. So when I feel it, it still feels wet, but it doesn't come off and kind of stick to my fingers. If it does, then you might need to add just a smidge more. And I'm just going to scrape down the sides. Just put a little bit more flour on the top, just to loosen it from the edges. You can see it easily pulls away from the edges here. And there you can see there how it looks. So now we're going to cover it up, and I'm going to place it in the oven with my proof button on. If you don't have a proof button in your oven, that's okay. You can turn the light on and just leave it in there for 45 minutes. I'm going to stop a little bit early with my rise, but you can see here that my dough is just coming right off the edge. It means it's hydrated the perfect amount. So now I laid out a piece of parchment paper, and I'm just going to dump my dough out onto it. Quite a wet dough. It kind of flopped out, but that's good. That's what we want. You can either take a sharp knife or your bench scraper. Now you can make these bolo de cacos whatever size that you like, but if you make them too large, they'll be a lot harder to transfer when you want to place them onto the stove. So I'm going to actually just break them into 6 pieces. So they'll still be quite large, but not too large that I can't handle it. So now each piece we're then going to take separately and pick it up and just roll it into a ball. Now, because of this is a gluten-free dough, it's not going to be the same pliability as a regular dough. You can see it falling apart there. However, once it's cooked, it will not crumble, I promise. So you can place it directly onto your countertop and roll it if you prefer, and just roll it into a nice ball. It should be sticky, but not really leaving much on your fingertips. So I like to then just cover it with the plastic wrap, and we're going to leave it in that ball shape. So we're just going to roll each of these pieces now into a nice ball. If you're finding they're kind of coming apart this way, just pinch them. It shouldn't stick to your hands. If it's the right amount of hydration, it won't stick to your hands. I've slowly traveled outside of the window here, so I hope you can see what I'm doing. Working with gluten-free dough is certainly a lot different than working with a regular gluten-containing dough. But this dough you're going to find is quite nice. It doesn't fall apart. It sticks together quite nicely. We don't want to overwork the dough too much. Make sure they don't get too close together because they will rise while they're sitting here. So you want to make sure they have enough room to do so. If you're finding that your dough is sticking to your parchment, then that's a sign that it's a little bit too hydrated. Super easy. That's why we have that extra bowl of brown rice flour. And you just sprinkle on the top while you're working the dough into the ball, and it should be just perfect. Now we're just going to let these bolos sit for 10 to 15 minutes while we heat up our stove. This is the point where Claudio would add in his extra fillings, like the chorizo sausage or the bacon. And all he does is flattens it out, folds over one side, and then folds the other over, tapping it down, flattening it slightly, and then letting it rise for 15 minutes. Make sure to preheat your cast iron pan or regular pan, just to a low temperature. You want to slowly cook this bolo de caco. If you turn them too high, it will burn really quickly. Then just simply uncover your bolos, and I like to use my bench scraper to just scoop it up off the parchment. But you can also just use your fingers and gently lift your bolo off the parchment and place it directly onto your heated pan. In Madeira, they no longer use the caco in most restaurants to cook the bolo de caco, and they're cooked on an open surface. Ours will rise perfectly this way as well, but if you're finding you're having difficulty with getting rise, you can break tradition a little and use steam by placing a cover over top of your pan. When you're baking gluten-free, using steam can be an excellent asset to help increase the rise of your dough. Cook your bolo de caco on one side for at least 5 minutes and check that it's browning. It will usually take at least 10 minutes per side. We want to slowly cook our bolo de caco to perfection. It's fully cooked when you can press on the top and sides and it no longer feels doughy. Once your bolo de caco has been resting for 15 minutes, then slice it in half and place it back onto the stove to heat the inside. Bolo de caco is traditionally served with a garlic butter.
This is Vanya, and she's mixing in the garlic butter.
To keep this plant-based, I used a plant-based butter, some garlic, and parsley. Give it a mix up and spread it onto the bolo de caco. Then just reheat it for a couple of minutes to make it nice and crispy. What they do in Madeira typically is to either serve it as a sandwich like you saw at the Bolo de Caco house, or in a lot of restaurants, they'll slice it into quarters and then they'll serve it with the meal. And it is just delicious.
Obrigada. Oh, yum.
So I hope you enjoy this wonderful Madeiran treat, Bolo de Caco. And now I hope that everyone can enjoy it with this gluten-free and vegan version. It's so good. Once again, I just want to say thank you to everyone at the Casa de Bolo de Caco in Funchal, Madeira. They were so wonderful to us and showed us all the ropes of how it is traditionally made there in the restaurants. And we really appreciate it. It was so much fun to learn and they were just so kind to us. So if you happen to visit Funchal, Madeira, make sure you give them a visit. I hope my family in Madeira will give it a try and let me know what they think. I love you all and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.
Flip it around the other way, love. No, like this. Yeah. Now I'm going to try Claudio's absolute favorite. She says that the front de animal, the alba, and bolo de caco. Did I say that correctly or at least close? Okay, yeah, it's close.